A Steve Smith century. Another ton of runs from man of the match Travis Head's blade. A 6-wicket haul from Jasprit Bumrah. A fighting last wicket partnership from India to avoid the follow-on. A late collapse from Australia. A thunderclap and lightning flash later, and it's a draw. Then a shock retirement from one of India's greats.
This will be my last day as an Indian cricketer in all formats at the international level. It's truly a very emotional moment.
The waterlogged third test between Australia and India at the Gabba had it all. And it offered plenty of highlights, but gave us no answers in terms of where this series is heading. Josh Hazlewood's calf injury opens another door of opportunity for Scott Boland on Boxing Day at the MCG, the very stage where he took 6 for 7 on Test debut 3 summers ago. But the Australian top order remains a mystery wrapped in a red ball riddle. Smith's first innings ton reminded us of his talent. His second innings failure of his struggle. The Aussies fell like brittle branches from an old gum tree on day 5, but the pitch was breaking up and the conditions tough, and they were in more of a rush than a Boxing Day sales crowd to post an unlosable lead before the weather gods bowled the final meteorological delivery. Smith has been up and down in the field too. He dropped a soda at second slip on the first ball of day 4 to reprieve KL Rahul, then plucked the catch of the summer to remove the Indian opener after he'd added another 51 runs. Scores of 21 and 8 from Usman Khawaja, the latter on his 38th birthday, did little to settle the rumblings about his immediate future. While New South Wales teen Sam Constas reminded selectors of his unbridled talent, with a record-breaking Big Bash 50 the previous evening. Meanwhile, India's captain Rohit Sharma's form with the bat will be troubling his own selectors. Does he move back to the opening slot with Rahul in sublime form and Yashasvi Jaiswal the future? Jackson Barrett, chief cricket writer with the West Australian, joins me to wrap up the rain-interrupted third test and to look ahead to Boxing Day. G'day, Jacko.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Good. Third test that had absolutely everything.
Didn't it?
And
a lot of rain.
And a shock retirement right at the end.
Yeah, incredible story. So Ravi Ashwin has rolled into the press conference before Rohit Sharma spoke on Wednesday afternoon and retired from international cricket. So he didn't play this match. He did play in Adelaide. Of course, India have played a different spinner in each of these tests. And he's called it quits. So Ashwin made a brief statement, didn't take questions, thanked Indian cricket, thanked what he called the OGs, Rohit, Virat. They came into the side about the same time at the early part of the last decade, and then basically left Rohit Sharma to speak to it. There were some quite probing questions. Sharma started by saying, it's quite personal, I won't go into it, but then later revealed that Ashwin's mindset was basically, if I'm not needed in this series, I'm not mentally here. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, this guy's taken a lot of wickets in India, clearly, and is still a really dangerous weapon there. But where their cycle is at, they played Australia in their last home season, then they played England in this home season. So those kind of big series, they're probably not going to play World Test Championship final, and he probably wouldn't play if they did. So I can see where he's at. He's only playing Test cricket for India now. It's at that right time in the cycle, and if he's fallen out of the side. It reminds me a little bit of Damien Martin, the 06, 07 Ashes. His was post-Amazing Adelaide, the second test, and Ashwin's just gone, that's me, I'm done.
I'll roll out some stats for you. Ashwin's 38, by the way, the same age as Usman Khawaja, whose birthday is today. But look, the second highest wicket taker in Test for India, 13 years, 537 wickets, second only to Anil Kumble's 619. So a wonderful record. Took one for in Australia's first innings in Adelaide. He's the fastest of all time. So this is all Test cricketers to reach 250, 300 and 350 wickets. He's also the only Indian cricketer to have scored a century and take 5 wickets in the same Test match 4 times. That's insane.
That's an incredible stat. 106 tests he finishes on with Adelaide. I think a couple of things worth noting with Ravichandran Ashwin. Clearly like an unplayable weapon in India, but was able to translate that game as well. Was able to be that more like get over the top of the ball, make use of the bounce in other countries. He was never quite as dangerous as he was in India, but he's had good series around the world. And his batting is the other one. So 6 Test hundreds, 4 of them came, as you mentioned, in games where he also took fifer, which is incredible. And the Indian spinners over the last decade, their ability to bat, you think Ravi Jadeja has Test hundreds, batted well, made a half century in this match. Washington Sundar can hold a stick as well. So it's a real feature of these guys who can just be unplayable in India, but then also bat 6, 7, 8, 9 and do a real job as well. So that was a bit of a shock out of today, which we otherwise kind of largely went to plan. And it's a big story. Sort of
went to plan apart from
there was
the
a bit
collapse
of a hiccup,
this
wasn't
morning.
there? Yeah.
Well, look, I'm putting it down to, a rush for runs, get the job done. Conditions, pitch starting to deteriorate. That gloomy sky overhead wouldn't have helped at all. But before we get just on that, so now there's talk of the Gabba reverting back to the first test. Of course, that won't happen for a few years because it's locked in Perth. But the way I look at the way as it rolls, I like Perth as the first test. Obviously parochial view there, and I think Adelaide for the pink ball test has really given us something. It's given a bit of pep to the summer. So I'm not sure where the Gabba sits at the moment, but I'm not sure if the answer is moving it back to the opener.
I think the rain has certainly sparked that sort of talk. Now, we spoke about it around the West Test, but how good was it having Perth as the centre of the cricket universe for 2 weeks while India was here? We had all the stories about the Wacker being in lockdown, all the build-up, all the selection stuff. We had Rohit Sharma coming into the country midway through the test. It was just all happening. It was brilliant. And I think Brisbane people want that because previously that's been their identity. It's that we never lost at the Gabba and it was a perfect way to start the series. WA is on a 3-year deal. That was this test against India was the first of a 3-year deal to play the first test of the summer here. So that means the Ashes next year and New Zealand the year after that. My understanding and belief is that the World Cup the year after that, so 2027, was a decent factor in why that deal wasn't extended further because that could cause a bit of a scheduling hiccup. It's in South Africa. It's towards the back end of winter. So I think that's part of why that wasn't locked in to leave them a little bit of flexibility. But WA wants it longer term. I think Cricket Australia is pretty open to the idea of it being longer term.
You can't keep chopping and changing.
No,
people need to know. They need their schedule.
I think that will become part of the Perth Test's identity as it was in Brisbane. It probably leaves Brisbane out in the cold a little bit. They get the pink ball test for the Ashes next year, but it's just not the same as Adelaide. People that are there say that it doesn't have the market grounds out the back. It doesn't have that sort of spirit.
Well, let's move the Olympics aside and where this bloody stadium's going to be built in Brisbane for the Olympics. But there's talk of the run, the net's been too short, so the bowlers had to go elsewhere to get their proper run up. Come on.
Yeah, it feels like a pretty hollow venue at the moment that might not be completely up to standard. It'll miss out on a test in that New Zealand summer. So then where do they kind of go from there? There's been talk that maybe the pink ball test alternate between Adelaide and Brisbane, but I'm not sure that's enough for Brisbane to have that real identity. It's lost the Gabba field because India won there and then the West Indies won there. And it's not a great venue. So
it feels like an ageing hooker, mate, just wandering around the streets trying to get his last tricks. That's what it feels like to me. Now, if you're drawing breath, just draw some breath when you're thinking about that metaphor. But that's what it feels like to me.
It does. I think that's been kind of like the undertone of this test is what's next for Brisbane.
Why can't we have...
This test was also played... It's not school holidays yet, which is why obviously the rain was a factor as well, but no one was there Monday or Tuesday because it's not school holidays and it was not much of a game. So
we've had this discussion before. Why not have 2 pink ball tests anyway?
Yeah, I'm completely open to that.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at, before we go on to the test, okay, I'm going to paint a different scenario. So day 4, fantastic. Probably the best 15, 20 minutes of the test match was India batting to avoid the follow-on of that last wicket. And the celebrations, the gusto coming out of those Indian rooms was almost like a victory. And in many ways it was, because that was the point we knew it was going to be a draw. They're still 1-1, and they retain the Border Gavaskar-Trophy. So the work is ahead of Australia, really, to win this series. What do you reckon they would have done had India not avoided the follow-on?
Obviously, it comes down to having lost Josh Hazlewood with injury. Mm-hmm. So it's about whether... So Stark and Cummins had both bowled 20 overs each. I think Australia might have gone into bat again and did what they ended up doing today, where they bat for 20 overs and try and put some quick runs on. The ruthless approach would have been to send them straight back in, but I don't think Cummins and Stark were up to it. I would have liked to have seen them do it. I think they would have lent towards
What if
not
even if
doing it.
Hazlewood was fit still?
If Hazlewood was fit, they would be more likely to. Australia's been pretty gun-shy with enforcing the follow-on for a long time. I know they did it under Darren Lehman in a rain-affected game in the West Indies at one point. They did it once.
Gilly? Did Gilly do it?
Did Gilly do it 2004?
And it didn't come off too well.
And they made 600 and we lost? Yeah, was that 2004?
I think so,
series?
around that era, yeah.
So they've been pretty gun-shy around it. I think if they, obviously that was a significant partnership between Bumrah and Akashdeep at the end of day 4. If let's say that partnership had fallen for 5 runs, I'm not sure they would have done it.
I reckon it would have been gripping TV for our friends and radio for our friends in the subcontinent. Would have been clinging onto every single ball and would have been celebrating just as much.
It would have been great. We were the same in the office. We were huddled around a TV in the newsroom watching those last balls. It was actually the most interesting 20 minutes of the test, wasn't it?
Yeah. It seemed like it had a lot of highlights, but no answers this test.
Yeah.
Really, when you think about it. So I think Hazlewood is out, certainly for the Boxing Day test, and I would suggest calf strain. I think he's out for the pink test, the Sydney test as well.
Yeah.
So it's pretty logical. Boland is the player to come in. 6 for 7 on debut 3 summers ago on his home pitch. Really good, bowled really, really well in the last test. So he's just an automatic, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he comes straight back in. He's almost an MCG specialist in that he's probably our best right-arm genuine swing bowler. Like Cummins and Hazlewood are real bash the deck kind of guys. Boland is more like the get it up and swinging sort of thing, and I've watched that 6 for 7 many times, and that's exactly what he did. So he's a bit of a deck specialist in that he will be able to do that and assist Mitchell Starc. So he's a lock. I don't think Hazlewood plays either test. Cricket Australia said in their statement when they announced his calf strain, they said he's likely to miss the remainder of the series. And this is he's out. He's out. Yeah. They're not going to even hint at that if he wasn't out. And they're prone to understatements. They called it calf awareness earlier in the day before he got it scanned. So, yeah, he will almost certainly miss the final 2 tests. It's a really exciting opportunity for Scott Boland, but I think it does pose some questions about the future of our bowling attack. So these 4, Cummins, Starc, Hazlewood and Lyon, have taken more wickets as a quartet than any foursome in the history of the game. History of Test cricket. They've been brilliant, but they're like Hazlewood and Starc are ageing. Hazlewood will be 37 by the time
I'm
he
still
comes
tipping
back.
it's the 4 attack for the Ashes though.
You reckon?
I still tip. I reckon
I
it
think
will
there are question marks around Hazlewood's body. They won't all play in Sri Lanka. Cummins might not be there at all with the
You got the
birth of his
Windies
second
tour as
child.
well. 3 tests in
They have that
June.
Windies tour coming up. Potential World Test Championship. I wouldn't nail on it's the last time we see them together, but I think it's towards the end of their days at the moment. And this was like a stark, pardon the pun, reminder of where they're at the moment. The concerning thing is that Boland's no spring chicken either. Sean Abbott is 32, and the other guy that spent time in the squad this year, Brendan Doggett, will be 31 by next summer as well.
But we do have Lance Morris, Jai Richardson, Spencer Johnson.
Yep.
Plenty of options out there.
Fergus O'Neill as
Fergus
well,
O'Neill.
doing good things for Victoria. So there are options there. It's about how they manage the next stage now and start blooding those guys.
Well, you're not going to replace those 4, but
No.
I feel like there's enough depth there in our attack, in our bowling stocks, that we're going to be okay. I'm not as convinced with our batting at the moment, and Khawaja, we mentioned earlier, 38 years of age today, twin failures, averaging about 12 over the test so far this summer. McSweeney, 25, first test series, averaging about 14.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced he doesn't drop back down to 3. Now, you're not going to drop Labuschagne and Smith on the back of the last 2 tests, and I don't think they'll make much change, to be quite frank, for Boxing Day, but surely they're starting to take notice. Now, Constas reminded us last night in a Big Bash game. Now, it's Big Bash, not Test cricket, so people don't smash me for this, but 50 off 20, I think it was a record for Sydney Thunder.
Yeah.
So he's just reminding them, I'm here, and maybe he's the player they blood in Sri Lanka.
I'm a big believer in you can only do well in the games that you're fixtured to play in. Big Bash is the only cricket that's happening. He's transitioned to white ball, made his debut for the Sydney Thunder. He's 19.
Fifth in red ball this Shield season too, for runs scored.
He took on the short ball. He did everything he needed to last night. When that Australia A game was reduced to 50 overs, he played a brilliant 50-over innings as well, scored 100 off 90 balls. And then when he's been asked in Shield cricket, he made a marathon 88 against WA. He scored 2 centuries in the same game against South Australia. He's 5th in the batting charts. So, I mean, Cricket Australia has put themselves in this position where there's no Shield games between last week and after about the same day as the second test in Sri Lanka starts. So he can only perform where he's given the opportunity to perform, and he's done that so far. I wouldn't anticipate a change to the batting order in Melbourne. I think Khawaja starts in Melbourne. He got a seed today from Bumrah, but his struggles against Bumrah have been really clear over the last couple of weeks. He's clearly not the only Australian batter. I'm starting to grow in that belief as well that McSweeney probably moves down the order when the time is right as well, and they look at someone else at the top of the order. So I think Constas is a decent chance to play in Sydney, depending on how Melbourne plays out and where the series is poised. I mean, we're going to have a live Sydney test basically either way. I think Marnus and Smith have bought themselves some time. Clearly they've been under the pump and they've come out and produced important innings. So they'll be around for the next little bit. They've kind of it feels as if they've kind of won back a little bit of control over their future a little bit. But Travis Head at number 5 has scored more runs than the rest of the top 5 combined.
And we shouldn't understate his performance in this test match. That first innings was something of magnificence.
It was.
So back-to-back test tons in test 2.
On Smith, I think Head probably dragged Smith along a little bit.
Yeah.
It allowed time for him to get into the contest and come along with him a little bit.
I was pleased for Steve Smith, but I'm not convinced. And I know it sounds funny, but look, it drops that first ball of the day, fourth day.
Yep.
Rahul cost us, 51 runs because he went on to make 88, I think, in the end, and then takes that just probably
Blinder.
the catch of the summer so far. But I'm of the mindset that I think the one he dropped was more evidence of his eyes going than the one not taking nothing away from how good that catch was, but they're the ones you sort of jag reflex.
So the one that he took, he was up at that closer slip to Nathan Lyon, and it was a good reflex catch, one of those where you're kind of taking it behind you a little bit. But I agree completely. And the other factor with the Rahul one is it was the very first ball of the day, and if you're not locked in for the first ball of the day and hyper attentive, what's going on? And it was regulation.
Bit of Keystone Cops too. It's a bit like the batting, stumbling around after he's dropped it. And, but anyway, look, he made a ton, so he saved his scalp for now. Transition coming, I think. So India, Rohit Sharma, where are they at? What do they do? They can't really. I mean, really, you could move him back into the opening slot, but then Rahul's been in great form.
I think they need to persist with Yashasvi Jaiswal.
Yeah.
And, I think Rahul is – we said it after Perth, and it's maintained that he is their most assured-looking batter at all times, and he played some beautiful strokes in Brisbane here. Yep, like Chansey, he was dropped in the second innings, but he's looked really good and has won the right. He's kind of dodged this, Indian cricket transition a little bit because he came in and looked good in Perth. He wasn't meant to play in Perth and has been able to win his spot back. So I think that's probably his for now. It's a little bit like the Usman Khawaja story, really. Comes in and bats well enough to win his spot. Look, Rohit's down at 6, didn't get an opportunity in the second innings, was dismissed for 10 in the first innings. So what's that, 19 runs in 3 digs now for him. It's not looking great. I don't think his captaincy... better judges than me haven't been glowing over his captaincy either and some of his tactics as opposed to the way Bumrah went about things in the first test. So, I mean, you'd have to say he's in trouble. He's clearly got credits in the bank, but he battled before New Zealand, missed the first test and has really struggled here. So he's going to need to find some runs. Maybe the MCG is a place for him to score some runs down the order. And then the other argument I've been hearing pop up a little bit is you can't carry your captain at 6. I don't necessarily agree with that. If they genuinely feel like he can do a job for them at number 6, then Mike Hussey batted at 6. Heaps of guys have batted at 6 and done a tremendous job for their sides. Plenty of all-rounders.
So what's the argument? You got to bat 3 or 4 or?
I think so, but
I don't understand
I don't really understand it if you feel like you're doing a job. So I wouldn't put too much weight on that sort of thing. He just needs to prove that he can do a genuine job for them at number 6.
And don't forget his form. This form lapse has been around for a time. This is something. This is not anything new to this summer. With the ball, Bumrah continues another great test from him, but he's getting weary. They need someone to really hold up the other end. Now you could argue Siraj Deep took some wickets this test, but I don't think they were overly convincing. And I'm not sure if Siraj is still. He's been somewhat shell-shocked by that incident, that clash with Travis Head in the last test. But they need someone to stand up as a strike bowler just to take a little bit of the heat off Bumrah, because it's a 5-test series is a long one.
Yeah, I didn't mind what Akash Deep offered. I thought his figures I think he took one for 100-odd, or 80-odd in the first dig, and I didn't think that quite did him justice, but he's still certainly isn't striking fear after Bumrah. And I think it's going to become more and more clear in the next 2 tests that if Australia get through Bumrah, now that's been a problem in itself. They haven't found someone that's been able to do that. But I think increasingly if you can get through Bumrah, the floodgates might open a little bit like they did in the first innings. Remember, Bumrah was battling a groin issue and under a genuine injury cloud before this Brisbane test. Gets a bit of a break between now and Melbourne, but gets no break between Melbourne and Sydney.
That's just cramp.
Well, he didn't bowl in the lead up to training, in the lead up to this test. So,
of course, he's got a groin issue.
They're going to keep,
This is what they're coming out with. Yeah.
They're going to keep trying to play that one down. They need to find someone. Akash Deep offered more than Harshit Rana.
Sharmy, any chance?
It doesn't sound like it.
No.
It sounds like that is diminishing by the day. It wasn't spoken about a lot during this test. I'd have to listen back to Rohit Sharma speak today, but. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that happens now, particularly if they win in Melbourne, then they can't lose the BGT. So they're a decent chance to just not bother if he doesn't get there for Melbourne.